All right, let's talk feet. So you've got your scraps of leather hard clay that you've not let dry out, because if they are bone dry, they will not attach. And you're gonna cut them into some little squares. So if you want them to be very precise, I suggest that you get a ruler, but cut one that's about the size that you think you want. So this one is like 1.5 inches by almost an inch. You could make them all squares, you could make them rectangles, they could be a variety of shapes. I think I'm gonna go with 1 inch by 1 inch squares. And when I attach them, I'm gonna recess them somewhat. I'm gonna put them like slightly inside the edge, because if they come all the way to the edge, they'll show and they won't like cast a shadow in as attractive a way as if they were like a little bit underneath. It creates a little bit of a shadow, which is nice. All right, so I need 4 of these. So here we go. All right, so at this point, I've got 4 1-inch square slipped and scored little feet. And now I'm gonna think about where I wanna place them. So I'm gonna wanna look at my piece from the top, and then I'm gonna slip and score the spots where I end up deciding that I want them. So I'm just thinking about like the placement right now, having a look at where they would be even. And they're only sticking a little bit right now because there's lots of slip on them. All right, and then here's my trick. Since I already slipped and scored those, I can just leave some of the gook from the slipping and scoring, and that's gonna show me where I need to slip and score on this side. So now I'm gonna slip and score it all together. All right, now that I've slipped and scored my foot area and all of my feet, I can just go ahead and stick them on. And once again, as always, there should be slip oozing out the edges. Give them a little zhuzh back and forth, and check that they're evenly applied before you commit to their location. You can slide them back and forth just a little bit. All right, so that looks like that, a little bit messy. Now I can come in with a finger, a sponge, a paintbrush, anything, and smooth out around the outside, removing any scoring marks. We do not want there to still be scoring marks visible. And then you can get in there if your finger is too large with a little bit of a watery paintbrush, and that'll take care of the slip that came out from underneath. And then don't forget to kind of give a once over on the actual bottoms of the feet. If there's anything sharp left there, it will scratch your table once it's fully fired. And you don't want it to scratch your table or wherever you set it down. All right. And come back to it and make sure that you put your name on the middle of the bottom, not on the feet, but on this area inside here, inside the X. And then it's gonna sit, you know, pretty nice with the lid fitted on. And now our final step that we just still need to do is to make our knob for our lid and do the surface. So that's next. All right, so I've got this little piece of clay, and I'm gonna fashion a knob for my box. I don't want it to be overly large or overly small. I want it to be a suitable size that I can wrap my fingers around it and pick the piece up by it. There are a couple of no-nos. If you make a piece into your knob that's too big, like this ball is just like a little bit, just very slightly too big, it makes the whole piece is overwhelmed by the size of this. You might want to make something a little bit smaller, but I'd encourage you to think outside of the ball. A lot of people tend to make just a ball knob for a piece, and it's kind of boring because we could have a lot more fun with it. So the theme of this piece is going to be looking like fire on the outside and like ice and water on the inside. So I was thinking that I might try to sculpt a little flame. And I think for me, I'm going to do this kind of in the round. So I'm going to roll it on the table. And just go with something kind of simple, but grippable. That's the main thing that it needs to be. So I'm gonna get my fingers wet here a little bit and kind of rub on it. I'm just kind of sculpting myself a little flame. I'm gonna peel off that bit. And then I will make it dance around for myself a little bit. I'm gonna make it so that it has a little bit of a move to it. So I'm right now swirling it in my fingers. And I think I'm gonna keep that motion going and just have it look like it kind of comes to like a sharp point. All right, so that immediately has quite a bit more interest to it as a knob than something more plain. All right, so think about the scale as well. I think that that feels just a little bit large for what I want, so I cut the bottom off and I'm just smoothing that over. Don't feel like you have to commit to the first thing that you come up with. You could play with it, spend a little time, you know, thinking about making it into something that looks quite sculpted or into something that's going to be quite fun. All right, so I like the scale of that a little bit better, and I think that'll be my flame. And from here, I just need to slip and score. So you put a little slip on the bottom there and figure out where the middle actually is without just, you know, give it a good eyeball to figure out where the middle is. And get in there deep. Remember, when we're slipping and scoring, it should really look like hamburger. This is the part that your whole lid is attached by when it's being picked up. So if you're not doing a good job of slipping and scoring in multiple different directions with an abundance of slip, you're not disrupting the structure of those particles enough. All right, so I'm just gonna squish that down in there. And I can run my finger around it. I can also come back in with a wet paintbrush, which is probably your best friend, and just give it a spin around. So one of the really important things is that you be able to get your fingers underneath. So there's actually something that you can grip on. If it comes up into a point, like a triangle, it'll be slippery once the glaze is on. So you don't want it to be like, I disconnected it. If you're pushing down so much on your lid that your lid starts to slump, take your lid off and push on it from the outside. All right. And then I'm gonna come back in and just kind of touch up my swirl because I think it started to kind of like get smushed a little bit when I was putting it on. Because I want that to be sassy. I want it to be expressive. I want it to be obvious kind of what the energy is there. All right. So I might tweak it and touch it up a little bit more under here because I feel like it's just like kind of lost some of its oomph. Or maybe I'll come in with a carving tool a little bit later and reclaim some of that area. But for the most part, that's gonna be the size of it. So I've got my knob. Don't pick it up by the knob until it's fired at this point. I've got my lid latch. Okay, and your name should go under here as well as on the bottom of your piece. And then you've got your piece with feet, giving it a little bit of lift. And then next up is your surface. All right, so here we are with our finished piece, ready to do the surface. For mine, I'm gonna create a texture using thick slip. All right, so I've already made some thickened slip and you can see my other videos for how to do that. But I'm just gonna take this thick slip and mix it up quite a bit. And I'm gonna apply it with my fingers to create a sense of movement on the piece. So this is quite thick. It's not coming off, you know, when I move my fingers around. And I'm just gonna go ahead and, with the lid on, I'm just gonna spackle this around everywhere. I'm not worrying about the direction first off. I'm just thinking about getting enough on there that I can make a coat. I've also gone ahead and placed it on a banding wheel so that I don't have to pick it up again until it's drier. Because if I try to pick it up again at this stage, like it's just not gonna work out. Okay, so it's on there and it's nice and thick. And I'm actually gonna wipe off some that's on my hands. All right, so now I'm gonna give it a bit of a feeling of direction. So I want it to be reading as fire. So I'm gonna try to bring motion you know, in a bunch of different directions. I'm giving it some swirls and a sense of movement and a sense of wildness. I don't want any spots to look particularly rough. So I'm coming in with a finger and like smoothing it and just kind of being playful with it and creating this sense of just like wild movement. You know, a sense that there are flames moving up. I really like these side to side motions. I'm doing like kind of playing with it now, kind of creating a swirl that goes one way and then the other way, and creating that sense of movement on the top as well to go with the piece. All right, so you can continue playing with yours and do any carving, any movement with slip, or anything like that that you want to resolve the surface of your piece. If you're working with slip, remember, slip dries into clay and it can be smoothed more at that stage. Don't try to make everything totally perfect at this stage because you'll just end up touching it to death. The other thing about the slip stage is once this starts to dry, you need to pull the lid off again so that you can actually like have a lid be separate. At this point, I've kind of covered that separation, but once it dries to leather hard, I can pick it back up again and clean up that joint.